Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and in today's lesson, we're going to be discussing three questions that are asked and answered in the book of Ecclesiastes. The reason I did the talkie points for answered is because there are no easy answers for difficult questions. And so the three questions which are asked here are: why are we here? What happens when we die? And how can what is wrong be made right in the world? And these are not difficult questions. Old Testament wisdom literature is question-oriented. The book of Job attempts to explore and explain why do the righteous suffer. Proverbs, in a nutshell, ask many questions, but we can summarize it for our present purposes as saying, how should I live my daily life? In Ecclesiastes, the same thing. We can say, what is the meaning of life? And within these general questions, there are dozens of questions, so it is not just one question. And this is distinct from law and prophecy, which speak to us in absolutes, and there are certainties, and there are comforting certainties within the absolutes, but the life of faith begins with living with knowledge and mystery, and wisdom is how to learn to live with the things which are not meant for us to know. So a lot of these questions are beyond our range to know. We ask them nonetheless. These questions are current in every man, woman, and child who has ever lived. They may not be articulated, but they are latent. And in our preamble introductory, we're going to follow the who, what, when, where, why formula. The who is answered in the first question. The words of Quoleth, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Solomon is the son of David, and he identifies himself as the preacher. So the Old Testament, this book is known as Quoleth. In Greek, it's Ecclesiastes, and this is semantically related to the word which is translated as church. But he doesn't quite call himself by name, but he was a king and he was his son, so he was his designated heir, and he was a philosopher king. And what it is wisdom literature. This is, the genre which pertains to the treasures of wisdom, what it means and what it does and how it goes about. The where is identified as Jerusalem, and the why is answered in the second verse. Vanity, vanity, says Quoleth. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity. So he is frustrated with life. He is bereft of satisfaction, and he seeks the meaning of life. And this is what motivates and prompts the writing of it. The when, now this is generally dated as the latest of Solomon's writings. So of the three books whose authorships are attributed to Solomon, those being the Song of Solomon, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. And there is a scholarly school of thought which argues that the Song of Solomon belongs in the genre of wisdom literature. They think it's commensurate with wise life to have a wife with whom you can say stupid, sappy things, which objectively speaking are foolish, but you always have that in your home. That is consistent with the wise life. We don't have a dog in that fight. We're just going to present you with its existence. That's generally dated at the early years of his life. So this is in his youth. It's love. He's stirred by his heart. He's a youth, and he has true love. And then Proverbs is the middle years. This is the apex of his influence and power and his enjoyment of life. He seems to have all the answers. But in Ecclesiastes, his most mature musings, he asks the questions to which there are no easy answers. So he has it all. And this really takes us, we have to begin the launching pad for the author, the who. His life story really begins when he's 19 years old. He's a young kid, and his father, David, had recently died, and he had recently emerged triumphant in a power struggle for the throne. He was David's designated heir, but he still had to contend with usurpers. And then he offers a sacrifice, and in a dream, he is visited by Elohim. He appeared to him. That word appeared that we read in 1 Kings 3:4 has a visual connotation, but we do not read any visible descriptions of Elohim. Instead, we just hear. And what he does is he asks a question. He gives him a blank check for anything he wants, his heart's desire. This is an unprecedented opportunity, and he, being aware of his youth and inexperience in the awesome task of building the temple which lay before him, he prayed for the wisdom that he would need to complete the progress and just to be a good king of the covenant nation. and he recognized his own inadequacies and it was fulfilled. But, one of the cursings and the blessings is that he's so pleased and delighted was Yahweh with the answer that the young king had supplied, that he gave him that which he did not ask for, which was riches and prestige. And he also gave him a long life contingent on his obedience. He lived to be 59. Ecclesiastes is in the final years of his life. So the three questions that we've selected, we'll try and make it through each of them, is why are we here? What is our purpose? What is our goal? And Solomon does write with a seeming split personality disorder, sort of semi-schizophrenic, not quite schizophrenic, that's probably too strong a word, but certainly he presents the duality of the secular humanist rationalist perspective, which is balanced and answered and finalized by the theistic perspective. So part of wisdom consists in just considering all perspectives. Try to not believe everything, but imagine everything, and don't just get caught up and carried around with every idea which comes your way, but question them and challenge them and grow in your knowledge through the process. So why are we here? The first thing he adopts is the attitude of the Epicurean, that life exists for pleasure. And all that my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion from all my labors. This is chapter 2, verse 10. So he had everything he could be delighted and satisfied with. He had instant access to it. He had the wealth. He had the wisdom to attain it. He had these combined in him. So nothing that was outside of his heart's desire was outside. As a king, he had concubines and just everything, and palaces and trillions of dollars. And he felt somewhat entitled to enjoy the fruits of his labor because he had worked for it and he had, conducted the commerce and all this. And this he considered the portion for my labor, yet he is bankrupt, he is empty, and he is dissatisfied. 11th verse. But when I looked at all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled, see, all was vanity and feeding on winds, and there was no gain under the sun. So the man who had completed the task of constructing the temple in Jerusalem, the first temple, and it just built, the book of Kings and Chronicles just describes this builder and this great king who increased in wealth and prestige and advanced Israel's geopolitical position on the international balance of power. But everything he had done, he considered it useless because, the fact is that the golden age could not last forever. And one of the things he expressed frustration and concern over is the state of his successor. Who was he leaving everything he had worked for? So pleasure and satisfaction and the accumulation of that which you can derive present. And he more explicitly denounces riches in the next thing we're going to answer here, or ask. Remember, we don't answer anything, it just asks them. Chapter 5, verses 10 through 15, he speaks of the emptiness of riches. And he had an abundance of riches. He was unprecedentedly wealthy, in addition to unprecedentedly wise. He who loves silver is not satisfied with silver, nor he who loves wealth the increase. That too is futile. So wealth offers no tangible or lasting or permanent satisfaction. He had it all, but he considered it futile because he was aware that he was, coming near towards death's door, and his best days were behind of him. His youth was a distant memory, and increasingly thing, and so he saw the bankruptcy in all the wealth that he had accumulated and gathered, and all the treasure which he couldn't have possibly spent in his lifetime, but it would be squandered away by unworthy descendants. With the increase in goods, there is an increase in those consuming them. What advantage, then, is there for the owner but to look on? Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the plenty of the rich does not let him sleep. There is sickly evil I have seen under the sun, riches kept for their owner, for his evil. But those riches perish through evil use, and he brings forth a son, and there is not in his hand. So the evil is not in the money itself, it's in the human heart's response to evil. Money is an item, and as such it is morally neutral, but the human heart, the human element, is what we have to judge and assess by. So it's our response and our reaction, and some people make sacrifices. They treat money as if it was God that is their preeminent concern, preeminent pursuit, and they make sacrifices. They pray for more of the same. They think constantly on it. They work at it, and there is no, strict speaking, separation between work and worship. When you worship, you ascribe worth to something, and if you think something's worthy, you're going to work for it. Then 6, 1, 2, and 7 also finalize this thought. Remember, he is presenting, for the sake of argument, a rationalistic, secularist, humanist perspective, only to expose its own hollowness and bankruptcy and emptiness. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, and it is great among men, a man to whom Elohim has given riches and wealth and esteem, so that being lacks none at all when he desires, but Elohim does not permit him to eat of it, and a foreigner consumes it. This is vanity, and it is an evil disease. So the injustice in the economic and the chain of the food chain in the human struggle for survival was all vanity to him from his observation and vantage point. And remember, he is writing from the peak of privilege. He is a king who was given riches and wealth and wisdom and esteem and honor and acclaim, yet he considered it, belonging to someone else or something else. Verse 7. All the labor of man is not for his mouth, and yet the appetite is not satisfied. So materialism that is unquenchable will be the death of you, and you will lose. You're just gonna end up with nothing at all, because naked you come into the earth, and naked you shall return. So if the meaning of life, if your pursuit in life is labor, work gives satisfaction to life, but work does not give meaning to life. Meaning is found in the one who gives life. And we take rest in him, and be still and know that he is. And stillness is a lost art, because we are all wrapped up in work. So work, the meaning of life, is not to be found in work. Why we are here is answered from the theistic perspective. Remember, I said the split personality, so he embraces both arguments. What we heard from before was godless, it was practical atheism, it was secular, rational, postmodern humanism. Postmodernism is really not as new as its proponents and avatars make it out to be. They call it the new morality, but it's nothing more than the old immorality refined and repackaged as something new. 2:24 and 25. A man could do no better but to eat and drink and enjoy himself in his labor. This too I saw was from the hand of Elohim. So the difference is that he recognizes the hand of Elohim in the labors, where he previously mentioned it. There was no mention of Elohim. Elohim doesn't make a difference, he makes the difference. So a life lived apart from him is bound to be bankrupt, empty, dissatisfied. You're going to be disgusted and empty, lacking, wanting, in need, and in poverty. But if you have Elohim, you have all the gifts and all the blessings and all the treasures and everything we can enjoy and take delight and satisfaction in from the earth is a gift to him. Therefore, it is not unrighteous for us to enjoy the fruits of the earth and the fruits of the earth and the fruits of our toil. We are entitled to enjoy that which we earn, but we have to maintain the sight and focus and concentration on the giver and not get wrapped up in the gifts, because when we worship the things of the earth more than the ones who gives us the things, that is idolatry, and that is what Solomon ultimately succumbed to. Read of suddenly in the 11th chapter of Kings, everything's going well, and then he just suddenly succumbs to idolatry from his numerous foreign wives. 3:12 and 14. I know that there is no good for them but to rejoice and to do good in their lives, and that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is a gift of Elohim. He repeats once more that all the fruit that we gather from the earth, all the harvest and the abundance, is a gift to us. So he was well acquainted. He had possessions, but the thing about possessions is that God doesn't want you. He doesn't want you to not have things. He just wants things to not have you. Possessions have a way of possessing their possessor, and possession does have demonic connotations. Where we're 3:13. I know that whatever Elohim does is forever. There is no adding to it, and there is no taking from it. Elohim does it, that men should fear before him. So why are we here? We are here to fear and worship and honor and praise him. Fear is not the cringing fear of the master, but we are to fear him and obey his commandments. This is the conclusion, the meaning of life answer that is finally provided in the 13th verse of the 12th chapter. We probably won't get that far today, but now we go to 5:18:20, and remember we read the wealth. This was the second thing we read from Why We Are Here. This is slightly after it. See what I have seen. It is good and pleasant for one to eat and drink, and to enjoy the good of all his labor, in which he toils under the sun, in the days of his life which Elohim gives him, for it is his portion. So there is nothing wrong with enjoying, but it ultimately, if you try to enjoy it apart from the giver, then you're going to be bankrupt, you're going to be empty, and you're going to have no spiritual satisfaction. So this life is, we are more than physical, carnal vessels. We are more than carnal creatures with carnal consumptions and carnal appetites. We also have spiritual vacancies that we try to fill with things. We all have God-shaped vacancies in our hearts and souls that we try to fill with other things, but God alone is sufficient and God alone is satisfactory. So other things get in the way, and we have to evaluate and prioritize people and things, and just use them the right way. Now 5:18. Further, when Elohim has given any man riches and wealth, and permitted him to enjoy him, and to receive his portion and rejoice in his labor, this is a gift of Elohim. So it was arranged by providence that Solomon would be the richest man in the world, richest man in his day, one of the top 10 richest individuals who ever lived. His wealth was estimated in the trillions, and this was all providentially arranged. And remember, it is in response to an answer to a question of what do you want? What is your innermost heart desires? And he longed for wisdom from an early age. Age 19, he yearned for wisdom, and he got what he sought. Verse 20, though it not be much, let him remember the days of his life, because Elohim bears witness by the gladness of his heart. So Elohim once more makes not only a difference, but the difference. He's the one who bears witness. He's the one who gives us the hearts, which can even be gladdened. He's the one who enables us, our capacity, the human heart's capacity, to be gladdened and uplifted and reconciled and restored. 9, 7, and 9. Go eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with a glad heart, for Elohim has already approved your work. So when we are enjoying the fruits of our labor, that we enjoy them is not what is important. It is how we enjoy it. We are not to, be it miserably, because that would be ingratitude. So an attitude of ingratitude is counterproductive and degenerative, but an attitude of gratitude and just the sight and picture of Elohim in the forefront and in the focal point of the picture, that makes the difference. 8. Let your garments be white at all times, so that your head lacks no oil. See life with the wife whom you love, all the days of your vanity life, which he has given you under the sun, for all your days of vanity. For that is your share in life, and in your toil which you have labored under the sun. Remember, we mentioned the Song of Solomon being possibly included in the genre of wisdom literature. There is wisdom in a marriage that is consistent with the lines and the standards of Eden, where two people become one souls and they just merge and cease to be individual identities. They merge as one, and they cease to be two separate entities. But that is the meaning and the miracle of a marriage, when two people become united in one, and that is a gift beyond gifts. Not everyone has it, and it probably makes the difference in married life. And, he says nothing new on that. Now we're going to turn to the second question he answers: what happens after we die? And every religion and every person answers this. We are all aware that we are alive, and we are survival-oriented creatures as people who live and breathe, and we all are aware that we can, will, and must die one day. So the great unanswered question, which spooks and haunts many, and many people spend their lives avoiding even the thinking of the question, far less the preparation for death. So life is a school which prepares us for death. But, he does write from the other perspective, the rationalist, humanist, secularist perspective, and that's much of what he conveys, at least until the 12th chapter. This begins in the second chapter, 2:16 and 17, what happens after you die. For there is no more lasting remembrance of the wise than of the fool, since in the days to come all is forgotten. And how does a wise man die? With the fool. So this is in the context of his debating the relative merits of wisdom and folly, where ignorance is bliss, is 'tis folly to be wise, is the motto and the mantra of the fool. But we who are disciples, we don't have the luxury to be foolish. So, but, for the sake of happiness, maybe there is something in the bliss of the fool that is greater than. Solomon does not exclude the possibility, and he sets out to examine most, and he considers his wisdom, all the wisdom that he had from this early age, 19 years old. He was just the wisest. He immediately demonstrated his wisdom with his judgment of the two prostitutes in contest for the living son. In 17, and I hated life because the work that was done under the sun was evil on me, and all is futile and feeding on wind. In 1:18, he says that with increased wisdom comes increased grief, and he also repeats this in 7:4. So the wiser we become, the more our grief increases, and because our awareness for evil becomes more acute, the wiser we are, the more noticeable imperfections and inadequacies come to us. So that stimulates grief and agony and frustration, because there is so much beyond our power to comprehend, far less control. And the pursuit of wisdom reminds us that we are mortal, we are imperfect, we are frail, we are flesh. 3:18 through 22 is the next thing for what he answers. This he debases us to equivalent of animals, and this is aligned with postmodern secular humanism. What do they teach? We are not creations of the fingerprint or the hand of the Almighty, but we are random galactic accidents, glorified apes. I said in my heart concerning the matter of the sons of men, Elohim examines them to see if they indeed are beasts. So we are animals in the same sense that we are categorized biologically. We have all the characteristics of animals, yet we have the distinct feature of the image, which makes us different and distinct from the animals. We are able to do certain things and enjoy certain experiences that are foreign to the animals, who are subservient to us in our unthinking, unreasoning brute beast, but we die the same as them. That is what he is pointing to. So he's almost questioning what advantage is there of even being human. 19. For the event of the sons of men is also the event of the beast. One event befalls them. As one dies, so dies the other. Indeed, all have one breath. Man has no advantage over beast, for all is vanity. He considers the fact that, even though he is exalted in life, the fact that he dies the same as the beast, he considered it the entire existence of life to be futile and vanity, because he is approaching death's door and he's aware of his own mortality. So he considers himself, with all the wisdom, all the wealth that he had gathered. Remember, this is his thinking apart from God, and apart from God, our thinking is flawed and unreliable. And all are going to one place. All came from the dust, and all return to dust. This is the mentality which reduces us to carnal creatures. And even if you do believe in the resurrection is the perfection of the human body in flesh, in the fleshly form. But even if so Quoleth writes from the vantage point that there is no resurrection, and that makes the difference. So, but he does allude to a spiritual resurrection in the 7th verse of the 12th chapter. So I saw that man who knows the spirit of the sons of man, which goes upwards, and the spirit of the beast, which goes down to the earth. Heaven and hell is up and downward. Animals, they are not moral. They cannot be held morally accountable because they do not have moral agency. They do not have the capacity and awareness to make moral decisions. So the lion shall lay down with the lamb. So if you're worried about your dog not being there in heaven, trust me, he will be. So I saw the man could do no better but to rejoice in his own works, for that is his portion. For who would bring him to see what shall be after him? So this is connected to the question of what happens after death. So this is why are we here? This is more aligned to the verse we just read with the first question, but it is connected to death. So remember, life is a preparation for death. And we read more on this subject in 9:5-6. For the living know that they shall die, but the dead know not, for nor do they know any more reward, for their remembrance is forgotten. So he considers death a one and done finality. That's it. You are out of here. And once you lose it, there's no more. So enjoy it while it lasts, because it's not going to last forever. And the fact of our wisdom only makes the prayer of Moses and Psalm 90:12 teach us to number our days, that we may acquire wisdom more acute. Also their love and their hatred and their envy have now perished, and they no longer have a share in that is done under the sun. So everything they've ever felt evaporates with their bodies. It just goes up there or goes down there, whichever way it goes. Their emotions, whether they were angry, happy, joyous, hatred, the hate-consumed person dies in his hatred, then his hatred is no more, yet it is passed on to the next generation, and it has a contagious effect. But 12:7 alludes to, now Quoleth does not, now David, the Quoleth's father, Solomon's father, had a concrete certainty of the doctrine of the resurrection as expressed in Psalm 16:10, but Quoleth somewhat lacks the similar faith. And the dust he returns to dust as it was, and the spirit returns to Elohim who gave it. So he's saying our physical bodies become worm food, but our immortal souls are joined, but apart from our bodies. So the New Testament doctrine teaches that we will have perfected, our bodies will be redeemed. In addition to our hearts and our spirits, which are already redeemed, beginning with the genesis of the born-again experience, so too will our bodies. But he's speaking of a spiritual resurrection. And this is the modernist school of Christianity. They deny or doubt the literal physical resurrection. They speak of a spiritual resurrection. And Solomon's speaking from the same vantage point here. So as he says in the first chapter, everything that seems new is in fact nothing new. Now to the questions of what is wrong with the world and how can it be made right. 7:13. See the work of Elohim, for who is able to make straight what he has made crooked? So wisdom consists in recognizing the wise design and not resisting it, not taking our own will, not trying to play or belittle God out of the picture by being our own God, but recognizing that what is wrong we cannot fix. We are at the mercy and control of circumstances beyond our power to comprehend, far less control. This makes faith all the more acute, and the connection all the more vital between us and him. And verse 29, truly this only I have found, that Elohim made man straight, but they have sought out many devices. So this answers the question, why is there wrong in the world? And it's not the Creator's intention that there be evil. He created everything good. Then Satan and eventually Adam corrupted everything, and all of creation longs redemption. But the point of the passage is that God is not to blame. We are accountable, individually accountable, the same thing as the angels and Satan. We are all individually accountable. So how can we make right what is wrong? Is to just not, plot and scheme and conspire against the Almighty, but to accept his control and not resist his sovereignty. 8, 12, 13, we're almost done here. Although a sinner is doing evil 100 times and is prolonged, yet I know that there is good to those who fear Yahweh, who fear before him. But it shall not be well with the wicked, nor would he prolong his days as a shadow, because he does not fear before Elohim. So there are two outlooks and two possible outcomes: the reverential, the worshipful, the fearful, the wise, the prudent, the good. the ones who are not sinners, and the sinners may escape justice in this lifetime, but eventually they're going to have to answer. So individual accountability gives us perspective on we can't make everything that is wrong with the world right, but we can make everything that is wrong with us right. We have to be our project and our concentration and not trying to manipulate the whole world around us, not to play God, but to be content to remain human and focus on the one man in the mirror. And the final verse we're going to read is 11:9. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart gladden you in the days of your youth, and walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes. But know for all these Elohim brings you into justice. So remember, he's writing from the vantage point of a mature muser. This is, the later years of his life, but he's looking back at youth and he's saying, enjoy it while it lasts. It is sweet. Make the most of it while it's here, because one day you're going to have to answer for how you lived with all the opportunities that the majority of which come your way. So how we spend our youth is instrumental and foundation into how we spend our old age, and we want to begin preparing now if we want to make it all the way up there. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.